Thank you, Susan. Sorry about that. I appreciate it. Because that's what I pressed and then he stopped my presentation.
Your screen sharing is not showing the whole slide, by the way. So
Really?
just showing your, like the editing view.
Oh, okay. Let me stop sharing and do this again.
Welcome, everyone. So glad you could join in today.
Can you see the full recording, Susan?
We can't see your full screen yet. I can't. Can anyone else? I see the kind of the presenter view.
Presenter view is what we're
Show
seeing.
black for me.
Let me see how I can stop. Okay, let me see what I can do here. My apologies, everyone.
While we're getting set up, I just want to say a warm welcome from SHIP and a big thank you to HP for sponsoring this event and the content. So excited for this. Feel free in the chat to throw a quick introduction in there. Who are you? Where are you joining from? I work full-time for SHIP and I work out of Kansas City, Missouri. And excited to have you all here, but feel free to do some networking and share some intros in the chat. See, we've got a Boise, Idaho. I've only been there once. It was lovely. California, Washington, D.C. Northridge. I've not been to Northridge, but we have lots of interns for SHIP out in the Northridge area. Pennsylvania. Awesome. Washington. Wonderful. Welcome.
Also, let us know in the chat if you're a student or a professional. Maybe both.
Yeah, maybe both. Great, we've got a professional member. And I'll say too, Dr. Anna Rodriguez will help lead the content here. I'm here in the background just to support. So if anybody has questions about SHIP or finding a local chapter or anything, I'd be happy. You can send me a message privately in the chat. Be happy to help you get connected more to SHIP if this is maybe your first SHIP event or just kind of learning about us too. I see another California. Wonderful. Good luck on that
I'm
job
so sorry.
search.
Can you see my full screen now?
Yeah, that looks great, Anna.
Thank you.
And a Buffalo, New York.
So sorry.
When I think of Buffalo, I think of lots of snow. I'm an ex-North Dakota girl, so I love the snow.
Okay.
Wonderful.
So we will begin at 6:05 to make sure people that are coming in a hurry to get home to see this fantabulous presentation can sign in. So hold tight. We will begin soon. Thank you.
Keep throwing those interactions in the chat. See, we've got some students and some professional members. We'd love to know where you're joining from. And to Antonina's question, if you're a professional SHIP member or a student SHIP member. Use this time to network with each other, expand that SHIP familia.
Awesome. And before we begin, I want for all of you, this is going to be a conversation. The agenda, I will walk you through it in a minute, but I want you all to unmute and ask all the questions that you want. Please engage with this incredible team of HP, Hewlett Packard. So let's begin. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here, especially HP for your time and dedication to this amazing topic. and is navigating ethics in the age of artificial intelligence, or AI. I will do a very brief speaker introduction, and then I'll stop sharing my screen, and then Hewlett Packard will do their presentation. And then there will be time for Q&A, but if they ask a question, I encourage all of you to engage with them, to have time with them. An hour goes by very fast, and I want to make sure that you get the most out of this engagement time. So my name is Ana Rodriguez. I'm currently responsible for event content like this one via our team that is the Research and Impact Office. I have a doctorate degree from UMass that I got when Christopher Columbus came to America way back when. And I have been at SHIP. This September will be 7 years. I'm a lifetime member, and I love to cook, ride my bike during the summer here in the DC metro area. Let me introduce one of our two speakers from Hewlett Packard, Aaron Weller. He's a leader, Privacy Innovation and Assurance Center of Excellence. He's an executive with over 25 years of experience providing risk management, cyber, and privacy guidance to large corporations globally. His experience includes roles as CPO and CISO, in addition to 20 years consulting to 500 companies in the areas of data privacy, cybersecurity, data governance, and related topics. Next, we have Nestor de Rivera, Senior Vice President and Deputy General Counsel of Trust and Privacy. He's a senior legal executive with over 24 years of experience providing legal counseling and business guidance to large corporations and C-suite executives on a broad range of global data privacy, cybersecurity, digital transformation, data governance, including artificial intelligence and machine learning, corporate governance, and ESG issues. Please help me welcome both Aaron and Nestor to this great conversation. I will stop sharing my screen. I don't know how I can stop it, but pause. Okay, and stop share. There it is. So I stop sharing my screen and I leave it to both of you, Aaron and Nestor. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Ana. Thank you for having us. Aaron, I don't know if you wanted to share anything in addition about your background or about today's program.
I wanted to introduce Antonina Robles, who is going to do an introduction before this wonderful presentation about the great partnership HP has with SHIP. Please, Antonina, take it away before we begin this presentation.
Thank you. Sorry, Aaron and Nestor. Before you get to hear from Aaron and Nestor, I just want to let you know briefly about the partnership that we have, with SHIP, and making sure that you understand that we have a very passionate team at HP. And I just wanted to let you know that if there's any opportunity for us to collaborate where your chapters were broken down into regional ambassadors. So we basically have a regional ambassador where we have a site. And then in the fall, we work closely with some of the local chapters, like in Vancouver. So for example, Portland, OSU, in Houston, the Houston University. And so we have very passionate people. I myself have been at SHIP with over 22 years, and I'm currently the global ambassador. And I just want to say, last year we did win the SHIP Star Award ERG of the Year because we have an amazing partnership with our Houston Hispanic Latino ERG. So we're here to help. If you ever want to talk about 3D printing, continue that information on privacy and ethics, maybe I can get Nestor and Aaron, but we're here to support you as SHIP members, as SHIP professionals. And I just want to say again, thank you to Nestor and Aaron for taking the time, because it's not easy to get into executives' calendars and Xochitl has been amazing helping us, making sure that we get this session together. So thank you so much, Xochitl. Thank you so much to Seble, who's our SHEP partnership, program manager. So you don't want to hear from me. I'm really excited for Nestor and Aaron. I mean, they will bring their A game. I know I worked briefly with Nestor when we first came to HP, and I love that he has that heart of helping. So Nestor and Aaron, please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Antonina. So while Aaron is bringing this up, I just thought I would share a little bit about my story. I mean, obviously the intro that Anna provided is my professional background, but from a personal standpoint, the reason why organizations like SHIP are important to me is that I am the first one in my family born in the U.S. My entire family, several generations back, is from Cuba, and prior to that, in Spain and Portugal. And so for me, I am that bridge between, kind of like the old family, if you will, and the new family in the U.S. And as a first generation Latino, everything, right? First person in my family to graduate from college, to graduate from professional school, being a lawyer, to being, in the professional circles as both first a lawyer in private practice and then now as an executive here at HP and previously at General Electric. It's been quite a journey that has been possible due in large part to relationships that I've had with different individuals over the course of both my educational career and my professional career, allies and mentors, both Hispanic and otherwise, that have helped me and guided me in my path. And so for me, it is very personal, particularly at this stage in my career, to do things like this and to give back. And so I will leave an open invitation for anyone to track me down on LinkedIn and send me a connection request. And I'm always happy to answer questions afterwards as well. Aaron, I'll send it to you.
Thanks, Nestor. Yeah, I am the first generation immigrant in my family. So you probably could tell from the accent I was not born and bred in the States. But yeah, I grew up in the UK, lived in Australia. Some of my family's Australian, and then moved to the States about 20 years ago. So I now have kids who are going through that, first in the US kind of experience as well. So yeah, Nestor and I have both been at HP for between 2 and 3 years. I was there slightly ahead of him. But we've been working together a lot on the topic of AI. And it's funny that when I was hired, AI was not even part of my job description. And I think that's one of the themes we're going to come back to kind of as we go through this is really a very, very fast moving space. And we want to make sure that as we are thinking about how do we incorporate AI into both the things that we do at HP and also into the products that we put on the market for others to use, that we're really thinking about how do we do that in a way that's really got ethics and kind of the truth to the way that HP operates, which is called the HP Way and goes back to the founders of the company. How, as we're doing these new things, do we stay true to these values that have been around for nearly 100 years, just in a slightly different way of doing things. We've only got a few slides today. We've got 9, I think. So there's plenty of time to be asking questions as we kind of go through. I know some of the folks here are looking at the chat and helping to move the conversation through. But yeah, I think both Nestor and I are very approachable. So please don't feel shy about asking as we go through and kind of talk through the stuff that we have prepared for you. But we have plenty of time for this to really be interactive and for you to get something out of it as well, rather than us just talking at you. So maybe we should start off at the beginning, because I don't know the level of knowledge that any of you have on the call. I saw that there was some of you are professionals, some of you just starting out your career. But we wanted to really kind of start by saying, what really is AI in this context? Because we see a lot of headlines, but that doesn't always translate into the real kind of what's actually happening and what are the real tools that people are using. And then we wanted to also baseline on what is ethics as well, because one of the things that makes ethics a really interesting field to work in is how contextual it is. So really thinking through what might be ethical to one person may not be ethical to somebody else. and how, when we're thinking about developing products where they work in a very certain way, how do we incorporate principles that could be seen as being a little bit nebulous, like ethics, into the way that we design and we use those products? So, Nestor, do you want to maybe give a start as to kind of what do you see as being AI in the way that we are talking about it here?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about watching the last couple of years in this space is that it almost feels like AI is something new. And the reality is that artificial intelligence has been around since the 1950s. It just may not necessarily have looked exactly the way it does today, but that really was the beginning of things. And if you can imagine, this past weekend, I went to the Johnson Space Center here in Houston and was looking through one of the exhibits on some of the earlier missions. I think it was Artemis. And lo and behold, there was an HP calculator there. So, of course, I love that, even on a weekend, I can't get away from work. But I read the little sign, and really what it was is, it said something to the effect of before computers. Folks use this HP calculator in order to do things like, make the calculations to determine the path and the trajectory of, the rockets and that sort of thing. And so it really was around that time in the 1950s that it started going from something like that to then looking at, computers, right, as we start to know them more today. And so when you think about, large language models and machine learning and things like that. It really was in the 1950s with Alan Turing and the Dartmouth Conference that we start seeing this space evolve. And it really has, evolved over time to where we are today. And I'll let Aaron tell you a little bit more about the technical side of things because he knows this far better than me. But I think the really interesting piece is that obviously, had a growth and an evolution from the 1950s, say, to the 2000s. And then really we start seeing things like Alexa and Siri and things like that start, giving you a little bit more of what we have started to see in the last couple of years, which is generative AI, right? Where you're asking a question and then based on the knowledge, right, that a model has been trained on, you get a response. And so we start seeing the wide availability of that through things like ChatGPT and the like in the last couple of years. And then I think, that is now quickly also expanding into a new era, which is agentic AI, which is, you're not just asking something and getting a response back based on data, but you're having, you're having, if you will, an agent that is able to tell you what to do or not do based on the information that you're sharing with it. So, imagine you're troubleshooting an issue with your printer and you're able to share, right, your printer, what it's looking like with the phone, right? And it's giving you commands back on what you should be looking for or checking, right, to troubleshoot whatever issue you have. And so really we're at the beginning of that space, but it's something that I think you're going to start to see more and more of. So it's really been an evolution of, AI from the beginning being that simple solution of, hey, let's go from a calculator to something that's a little bit more robust to now it's like the real-time examples, if you will, given the current place that we are in time to solving the problems that we have, both, as companies, but as well as individuals.
Yeah, and I think not to put too much of a technical spin on it, but what we're really seeing now is that transformation from we're really manipulating the virtual world, which is a lot of where, we're running analysis over big data sets, we're finding insights that maybe we couldn't see previously. And we're also in a transition to be able to manipulate more directly the physical world. So not just through things like self-driving cars and some of the other computer vision, and other areas that really do rely on these very, very complicated models and systems that have an understanding of the world and what they can do to manipulate it. But we're really starting to see, kind of, as Nestor mentioned, with agentic AI, really then combining agents that can go and do things with physical devices. So the Roomba that I have from 10 years ago that will bumble around and just about manage not to fall down the stairs, right? We are going to start seeing a lot of these brand new classes of devices, just the same way that we didn't really know when smartphones first were developed, just how much we were going to rely on them and how much they were going to change the way we interact. And I think that's one of the big pieces that really kind of underpins a lot of why there is the focus right now is whether or not you know that you're interacting with AI, you will be interacting with systems that use AI probably tens of times a day. Given that it's really, I was talking to one of our data scientists earlier, he said, I don't even know why we bother calling them AI systems anymore, because there is nothing that is not an AI system, because it's really just so embedded into pretty much everything that we work with, everything we buy from other companies as well. But as Nesta said, it's really kind of more of a change of these are the next layer or the next evolution of what's come before. And what that means is that we can then apply from an ethical perspective the things that we've seen for a while about, why do we do things in a certain way? What are the guardrails we put around even systems and applications so that we don't get people to do things that's not in their best interests, to do things where maybe they're being manipulated and they don't know about it, and to really think through how do we apply that to these new technologies. I see someone has raised a
I
hand.
did. There's a question in the
Yeah.
chat from Mike Cordova. He says, will the law be able to keep up with AI?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. It's one that I think the answer is still out there in terms of whether it will or will not be able to. But I think I can say this for it. So when you look at AI, there's so many different intersects in laws that already exist, right? So things like privacy law, because the engine, if you will, of AI needs to be fed fuel, and that fuel is data, right? So you got privacy law, you have cybersecurity law, right? That is there already. You have consumer protection laws. So there's an intersect of you have intellectual property laws, right? There's a whole intersect of laws that already exist. And so when we think about regulating AI, part of the argument is why should we create a whole new governance structure, right, with an additional complex layers of compliance, if we can just leverage some of the, laws that exist, some of the standard frameworks, and I know, Erin is going to talk a little bit more about that, some of the standard frameworks that exist, things like NIST and ISO and the like, right, in order to be able to provide for that AI governance in a way that, addresses what we needed to address without being, heavy-handed. Now, having said that, for those of you that work in the EU, the Parliament in the EU did pass the EU Data Act last year, which companies are in the process of determining how to come into compliance with it. And there's some deadlines that are fast approaching this year and next year. And so, obviously, when we talk about the laws that pass, unfortunately, a lot of times those laws are written by folks that aren't very savvy in terms of how the laws actually end up impacting things, right? They're more theoretical in terms of what it is they're trying to solve for. But when you actually put it in the hands of folks that need to work in the space, it may have unintended consequences. It may be too conservative. It may actually stifle research and innovation. And so, I don't think that we'll ever be at a place where, the law will catch up, but I think hopefully we'll be at a place where we can leverage what already exists, right, in terms of laws to not add additional layers of complexity, while at the same time helping legislators that choose to enact laws in these areas do them in a way that's thoughtful and doesn't stifle innovation and the things that can be done in a positive front with AI.
Yeah, and some of these things, so when GDPR came out in 2018, the intent was that that law was written in a way that it would last for 20 years without significant revisions. And the way they did that, as opposed to a technical standard like PCI that's revised on a 3-year cycle, minor revision, minor, then major every 3 years, is because that's really into the specifics of how these things work. But if you look at the FTC in the US, a lot of their privacy enforcement has been under Section 5 of the FTC Act, which came out in 1935, right? And it's vague enough with kind of unfair and deceptive trade practices as what it regulates, that's been applied to a number of different technologies and ways of doing things kind of as they've evolved. So we don't really have like one type of law. There's this combination of, which we'll talk about in a minute, laws, regulations, standards that are there, and they're all at different levels. And really, as you're looking at from kind of our perspective as HP or any other big company, it's trying to work out how do you build a program when there are things you have to do and there is structure around ways you could or should do things, but there's often not necessarily a complete overlap or alignment between what all these different requirements are. So that's kind of part of the art of building and managing a program, is working out, what are the things we have to do, what are the things we should do, what aligns with our values as a company, and then developing a program based on that.
And that is a perfect segue to the next question, which is what is ethics, right? Because, at its very core, ethics is grappling with what is right and what is wrong. And, stated a different way, it's, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And I think as Aaron alluded to in the beginning, it can be contextual, right? But I think that there is, if you will, a lowest common denominator, if you will, view, right, on ethics. And when I think about ethics, the best thing that I can use to illustrate it was, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but there's this drawing, right, where there's a train track and it splits, right? And on the one hand, if you as the person that has to direct the train at the split, if you go right, you run over one person, right? But if you go left, you run over 7 people, right? And so you're forced with this conundrum of exactly the trolley problems. You run over the one person, you run over the 7 people, right? And so you can get into all sorts of argument about, well, who is that one person versus who are the 7 people? And is that one person, young and at the beginning of their life, compared to the other 7 people, that sort of thing. And so, you obviously can have very different views, right? In terms of, hey, maybe I should send it down the path of the 7 people versus the one. But I think we can kind of just at a very high level say that it's probably less bad to have one person die than 7, right? So yeah, stop the trolley. If that were the case, I think that would be the solution in all of them. But so ethics is a bit like that, right? Is what are the considerations? What are the norms? What are the things that that you should consider in deciding whether you should do something, not whether you can do something? And when we talk about it in the AI space, there are some specific concepts, right, that have popped out in that. And Aaron, if you wanted to flip to the next
Yeah.
one, but all the things that kind of pop up in your head when you're thinking about, what is it that AI can, conjure up? Obviously challenges everyone thinks about. We have we're humans, we default to the bad, but you have things like bias and misuse and discrimination and hacking and data security, right? That may be on the challenge side of things. But there are also, some positive things that can come, from the use of AI. You can solve real world problems in a responsible way. You can make a positive impact, right? You can ensure that to the extent that data is used, it's used accurately, right? And that it's benefiting society. So, all of these concepts, are at the root of what is AI ethics. And as a company, when we were working, Aaron and I, on a project last year to define what should be the AI governance principles from an ethical standpoint for our company, we worked with a third party who did some benchmarking with other companies out there to see what are the types of common ethical concepts or dimensions that pop up in lists of principles, if you will, that other companies have come up with. And this is where we ended up. Like, if you look at, across 15 sources, 14 had transparency. So transparency is, things like providing information about how your AI model works and makes decisions, what data it's ingesting, what model of analysis it's using. Accountability was in 12. So, ensuring that you are willing to be accountable to your models working or not working in a proper way and addressing them when issues are raised. Fairness, ensuring that your models don't have a discriminatory or biased outcome, right? And making sure that you're making adjustments to ensure that that doesn't happen, that they're socially beneficial. So, that you're solving real world problems that are benefiting society as a whole, that you're not using AI for something that could be deemed detrimental, right, to society as a whole. Data privacy, safety, and on and on. So, it starts getting lower on the scale, but it doesn't mean that they're not important concepts. So when we talk about, AI ethics, these are really a lot of the principles that you see out there from the majority of companies. And I'll let Aaron talk a little bit about kind of the standard and the regulatory space that's evolving.
Yeah, thanks, Nestor. So one of the things we looked at is one of the things there is no shortage of is a lot of guidance out there around how you should or shouldn't be using AI. So when we were developing our governance principles, we looked to, Nestor already mentioned NIST, which is a US body funded by the government that develops standards on a range of different topics. We also looked at the ISO standards, so the International Standards Organization. And my team actually represents HP in the artificial intelligence standard space. And then the EU AI Act as well, along with a number of other different bodies of work, including what some of our other industry peers were saying about, how are they thinking about managing AI within their organizations as well. And then the other piece that I kind of mentioned this right back at the start is we then looked at this through the lens of the HP way, which is really kind of our founding principles as a company around, doing the right thing, being fair to people. And you can see there's actually quite a good correlation between some of the elements of the HP way and then what some of these ethical dimensions were that we identified from this benchmarking study. So what that meant is we then ended up with these 10 principles that we've grouped into kind of clusters of 2. And these are available on our website in, what is it, Nestor, 30 something languages?
32 languages.
Yep. So that link will go to the page that's got all of the languages that you can choose the one that works for you. And that's kind of part of our commitment to, not just putting this guidance out in English as well, but trying to make it more accessible to a range of people that would use our products around the world. Go on, Nestor.
Yeah, so just to give you a little bit of background on how we came up with these, obviously we started with the work that we shared on the prior slide with the third party that we engaged, but then we constituted a broad group of stakeholders across HP from all sorts of different business units and global functions and areas of expertise to talk about what that means for us, which ones made the most sense or were most important for us to be driving as a company. And that's how we ended up with these 10. And I will just say that if you take some time to look through these, and like Aaron said, they're on our website, a lot of the concepts that you saw on the prior page, feature here, things like transparency and fairness and accountability and safety and security. Those are things that very much appear in a lot of big companies' privacy governance principles for AI, where we started to maybe do things a little bit differently in our own unique way, as we also felt very strongly that engagement and education were important. And what we mean by that is that we want to advocate for policies and regulations and standards as well, that promote responsible, ethical, and beneficial AI development and usage, right? So working with legislators, both in the US and around the world at the state level, as well as the federal level in the US, to ensure that to the extent that laws are, enacted, regulations promulgated, guidance provided, that, they do so from kind of a reasoned approach. And then finally, regularly not just training and educating our own workforce, but also ensuring that our customers, right, have a base of knowledge on AI so that we're able to have intelligent conversations about what are the problems or the potential, opportunities that they see that we can help them with. And one question that I did see in the box that I just kind of wanted to highlight is there is a federal, law proposed as part of that big, beautiful bill that's in Congress right now of basically preventing enforcement at the state level of any sort of new AI laws for 10 years. And the way that we approach this, and we've done this in other areas of compliance, is we're doing this because we feel like this is the right thing to do. And we're doing this because we feel like this is the right thing to do, particularly because this has been part of our DNA for 80 years as a company. And so regardless of whether that is actually enacted or not, we're still going to do all of these things. And we're still going to try to make it a better, world, if you will, right? With the use of AI. As far as like who our competitors are, have to be, not to be cheeky, but like I don't know that we necessarily, I'm sure the business teams do, but at least from our perspective, the work that Aaron and I do, we don't really see competitors out there. What we see is just what are the things that make the most sense for us to be doing as a company, and collaborating with like-minded other companies that feel and think very similarly, and sometimes learn from them if they're doing things differently. But I think always with going back to the same compass, if you will, on why this is important to us and why we're doing it. I think I see another hand there.
Yeah, Lisa has a question. Lisa, go ahead.
That was an accident. Sorry about that.
No worries.
No, if
That's why my
any,
head's going back and forth.
no, if any of you have a question, please unmute yourselves and ask. Okay?
Yeah, I would just add some on the 10-year piece, right? The US is not the only country that HP operates in by any stretch, right? So even if there is this moratorium at the state level, not at the federal level, on additional state laws for the next 10 years, the rest of the world is not going to stop moving forwards. And I think that's kind of where we'll see, both from a standards perspective, as well as from laws in other countries. There will still be other things we need to do. And if any of you have kind of worked where you're trying to build and maintain a global program, it's really hard to kind of say, well, we're going to do one thing over here and one thing over here and another different thing here. So what we tend to do is to say, where are the things that we should implement worldwide? And then where do we need to make variations if there are things that are significantly different? So the chances are that even if development at the state level was stopped for 10 years, HP's program in 10 years will be very, very different from what it is today because of all these other dynamic factors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did anyone have any other questions on the principles? One of the reasons that we are actually giving this presentation, right, that helps support our engagement and education principle too. So it's not just within HP, although this does say kind of educating HP employees. We also do provide other resources, including training for our partners in how to use AI, how to get the most out of it. And that's an important part of, as we're looking at putting new products on the market as well, it's both making our products better through the use of AI and also providing capabilities for people to then be able to use AI for themselves to create whatever they want to create. So things like our range of AI PCs that well, both Nestor and I have AI PCs that we're using, right? Those are things that we are using internally, but also they're providing capabilities for others, our customers, to be using AI to go and do things that we probably haven't even imagined at this point. So that's kind of the cool place with that you get to build the machines that then everybody else can use to go and do, the creative piece on top of that. But it's not all roses. So there are some scenarios here where, just to give you a sense of some of the real examples of things that have gone wrong, these are all public examples, and we're going to be a little bit generic about who the companies are. But just to give you a sense of some of the things that we are trying to protect against, and make sure that HP doesn't end up in the headlines for this kind of thing, or any of the other related issues that that could be brought on by using AI without really thinking through some of the implications. So the first one of these examples was with, this was very early when ChatGPT first came out. And a big tech company said, yep, we want people to use ChatGPT. This is a great new tool. It's going to really help improve efficiency. We'll get more done. And there were two specific things that happened. One was that some of the code that this company was working on was uploaded into ChatGPT to try and get it to work out how to write the code more efficiently. The trouble was that this wasn't the enterprise version of ChatGPT where they give you guarantees that they will not use any of the prompts that you provide to then train their model. Because if you put that code in and those protections don't exist, it could be that that code is then provided as an answer to somebody else that's asking a similar question. Right, so that came out. And the other thing that happened was that they started getting ChatGPT to do transcripts of calls. And I saw one of you guys earlier, I can't remember who it was using a third-party AI transcription tool, which you don't need to because we're already transcribing the meeting. But that's the kind of thing where Nestor and I will get questions internally to say, what happens if we're in a meeting and someone turns on a tool that's not approved by HP, that we don't know where that data is going? Potentially we could say something that's proprietary or sensitive. In this forum, doesn't really matter, right? Because any remarks we're saying, we're already providing that filtering before we say something. But it's really important when we're thinking about our internal meetings to make sure that only the tools that we've already had our team and cyber and the data science folks go through and do a review already that are used. Otherwise, that could result in loss of intellectual property as well. The second one, does anyone have any questions on that before I move on to the second one? Okay. The second one was with a major airline, where the scenario was that a customer had I believe one of their family members had died, and they were trying to book a flight, and they weren't sure if they were going to need to cancel it. They wanted to understand the bereavement policy of the airline. So they went to the airline's website, interacted with their customer service chatbot, and the chatbot said, "Don't worry about it. You're covered. Here's a link to the bereavement policy." If the customer had actually looked at the bereavement policy, it was not correct what the chatbot was saying, and it ended up that they would not get the money back in that scenario. So the customer, of course, complained and said, "Look, here's the information the chatbot gave me. They told me one thing, and now you're telling me something else." And in court, the customer said, "Well, the chatbot's a separate legal entity from us, therefore we're not responsible for anything that it tells you." But as I'm sure most of you are aware, although you can outsource a process, and this goes back to what Nestor was saying earlier, AI in many ways is not new. You can outsource the process, but you don't outsource the responsibility for that process operating effectively. So in this case, the judge was like, that's not a good argument. You still have to go through and compensate this customer and change the way you do things. And then the last one, which is if you're a company that's building AI and spending a lot of money on actually doing that, should be something you're really thinking about. So with this one, this was a national chain of retail locations. And what they did was they had a facial recognition. They have cameras in all of their stores, and they were using AI facial recognition to try and identify patterns to detect shoplifters. Now, because their training data set was biased, they hadn't identified that it was biased during the training. They were identifying people of color at a much higher frequency of being likely shoplifters than people of different colored skin. So what happened, the FTC investigated, and what they said was, not only this model is too broken to fix, you've got to delete it. You've got to delete all the training data, so you can't just then use that data you've collected to retrain a new model, and you're banned for 5 years from doing anything else with AI-powered facial recognition. So that's the kind of thing that could really concern a company, because if you get it wrong and you're banned from a number of years from doing it or trying again, that could mean that your competitors could really get ahead in that space. So these are all real-world examples of some of the reasons why you need an AI governance program to try and identify and put the guardrails in place so that these kinds of things don't happen.
Yeah. And just kind of take it home, Aaron. I mean, when you look at these three scenarios, a lot of kind of the root, if you will, of these three incidents can be traced back to misses, right? That happened in things that are considered AI ethics principles. So for example, in the third one, you're talking about bias and discrimination and the models not, working as really they should be. Right. And the second one, you're talking about inaccurate information. So you're talking about the data not necessarily being the correct data to result in the answer that's the most accurate for the customer. And the first one, the intellectual property angle, right, where you can basically lose your ability to claim a legal right because of data that you're submitting into a public version of an AI application. So all things, in my view, that if the company had had a, well thought out AI governance process that was rooted in certain basic principles, that might not have happened and might not have, led to the outcomes that did.
Hi, Aaron and Nestor. There's a question in the chat from Mike Cordova. Mike, do you mind unmuting yourself and ask your question, please?
I can get my stuff unmuted. Yeah, I basically just had the idea that this idea, I put some comments in there about, AI being rogue and the idea of putting limitations on it. We started out with saying that law has a hard time keeping up with AI and technology in general, and just AI just being almost a little bit different flavor of technology, the pacing of AI.
Mhm.
And I'm just concerned with how do we keep effective limits on AI? Because a company can have a problem. One company has a problem, but you can
Yeah.
be creating another dozen companies running those same models and bypassing it faster than you can get through the legal cases. So yeah, some people are going to suffer, but it's the idea of AI, the way that it's set up is so aggressive in its modeling of searching for intelligence. It's looking for weaknesses and looking to evade limits. Unless it's very 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 carefully coded, it's always pushing the edges. And our legal system, at least in the United States, is just not that quick.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree that there is risk there, and I think that's one of the reasons why, if you look at the way that the AI Act, the EU AI Act works, they're really talking about types of use case, some of which are completely prohibited, some of which you've got to put a whole bunch of different restrictions around how that works. They don't see generative AI in itself as being extremely high risk compared to some of the other things around, choosing who gets, offered a job interview or offered a job, things that could, result in people being significantly harmed or discriminated against. But I would agree that it's, with a lot of these general models, there's a lot of different things that they can do. From a company perspective, it's a little bit different from, from a broader societal perspective. We try and control, what we can control. Are we buying AI from vendors that, are aligned with kind of our views? Are we making sure that there are, to the extent that we can get certain commitments contractually in place, can we do that? And what we look is kind of, we're almost building like a layer cake of all these different controls at different levels. If I block this AI at the firewall, then there are certain things it can't do. So we've always got that kind of trade-off between enabling innovation, and this is a conversation that Nessa and I both have every day. There's this trade-off between enabling innovation and just letting it be a free-for-all where something's going to come off the rails sooner or later. So we're always trying to find that right balance, but it is challenging given how fast things are changing.
Yeah, I think my issue was really with, I appreciate folks attempting to make, because the conversation has to do with ethics, of making that attempt to be ethical. My concern is that the non-ethical actors may have an advantage, and that's
Yeah.
the concern, is that the technology moves so quickly that while we support obviously the ethical uses, et cetera, for if you have a non-ethical actor, because the EU may have some rules, but what's to prevent someone from setting up some other third world country, et cetera, and developing their model there? It's such a powerful tool. It seems like the ethical limitations are stretched.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree.
Yeah, I don't know.
with the
I was
challenge.
like, I don't know that we have the silver bullet for that. It is the case, but I mean, unfortunately, there is a lot of human decision making that goes into how you use AI, and I think we're never going to be able to be in a place where it's not used improperly. I guess the question becomes, if it's in a competitive environment, right, where your competitor is doing something that you're not willing to do, and ethics is at the root of it. I think it all comes down to is how important is that ethical, restriction to you. And it might be a case where you say, I'm okay with not making as much profit because, I have certain values that I want to make sure that I'm following or what have you, right? Of course, if you're a publicly traded company, then that bumps up against, what the shareholders, are after, which is more profit and more value in their shares. And then you might end up with either the board of directors or a shareholder derivative lawsuit, taking, the company to task for why it made a decision that seemingly put it out of, competition, if you will. So it's something that's not easy to navigate. It's just, I think, part of the overall governance process that a corporation needs to engage in. And it's just another aspect now that is gaining attention and needs it.
I want to remind everybody that we have 9 minutes left to the end of this conversation. So if you have any questions, unmute yourselves and ask the presenters. Otherwise, presenters, you can continue to have other slides.
Sure. I think we've only got a couple more slides to go, and then we can pause for questions. But really, this was what are we doing at HP, right, to actually implement ethical AI? So we've got a number of, as Nesta said, even when we were going through and developing our principles, this was kind of, it takes a village to go and get these things built. And with our review process as well, there's a lot of different parts of HP that get involved in reviewing different AI use cases. Some of them are more on the technical side, some are more on the business side, the legal folks, even our employment lawyers, if we're using data that's going to be, about employees, or if employees are using things that could, impact them in other ways. So what we've tried to do is to say, let's get at least a consistent baseline for this is the way we should describe the level of detail, like understanding what are we trying to do, and then get a range of people who are coming from different backgrounds and different perspectives to say, does this really make sense given kind of my domain of expertise? So we've built these processes that operate across HP, and Nesta and I both, we have responsibility globally for looking at these. So any use of AI, whether it's external, built into our products, internal, things that our employees use, all of those things will come through and get some level of privacy attention, just the same as they would with cyber, just the same as they would with our data scientists, who can really dive into some of the details of the model weights and the biases and those kinds of things. So in addition to that, we've also developed a number of different training classes. We've included AI ethics into our overall ethical training that's mandatory for everybody at HP to do every year. I'm trying to think, Nesta, that there are more pieces of that. We've got whole websites internally that describe, this is how you can use it. We've got approved lists of tools that we can use and kind of guidance on.
You have an FAQ your team, put
Yep.
together after a fireside chat that I had with our chief data officer last summer. And interesting enough, on the use case review side of the house, I think the one thing that we've also done is we've adjusted given, the importance and use of AI within our company. So before it was a one-stop AI use case review process for all use cases, whether they were internal applications or external. And recently, we've undertaken more of an effort to bifurcate that approach between internal uses of AI and then AI that we're building into our products that we're then selling to customers. And ensuring that on that side, right, where we're building it into a product, whether we're building it ourselves or we're bolting on a third party's product into ours and then, obviously putting it out into the marketplace, that's part of that very tight product design process, right? That already encompasses things like, privacy, cybersecurity, regulatory requirements, trade compliance, requirements, supply chain issues, whatever, right? So that is a very different set of considerations than if you're using the tool just internally, right? And then if you're just using internally, there are varying levels of risk associated with whether you're using it for something like a chatbot that answers questions about what your benefits are at HP versus something that is helping to look through thousands of applications and determining which candidates might make the most sense for a particular role, right? There's varying degrees of risk and review associated with kind of like those two ends of the spectrum, if you will.
And then kind of looking into the future.
My crystal ball is kind of fuzzy. I don't know what yours is like.
Well, I think really we're going to see more of the same faster, right? It's as we've seen before, right? We've had these waves of technical innovation, and the question about, what if AI goes rogue? Back at the start of my career, I used to run teams of ethical hackers, and we would hand code scripts, and we would do a lot of stuff very, very manually. And now there's a lot of tools out there. You can cause a huge amount of damage as an amateur in a way that, my team would have taken, weeks to actually achieve the same result, even though that was, we were good at what we were doing at the time. And I think the tools are moving so fast that really kind of having that ethical foundation, asking those questions about, just because you can, does it mean you should? We're really trying to see how do we, and we're even pushing back on some of our partners and the vendors we work with and saying, look, you've sold us this product, but we don't get the visibility into how it works, or we don't see, you haven't given us very good information about how you trained for bias, or your disclosures are bad. Like they're not clear as to what you're actually doing with the data. So I think one of the things that we've noticed, and even working with some pretty big partners, say nobody else has kind of brought this stuff to our attention before. Well, because we're looking at it through this different lens, where we do see that it's our responsibility for the tools that our employees are using are fit for purpose. And that all kind of comes back to how do we work from those principles so that we're not trying to come up with a brand new checklist every time there's some variation of AI, but building kind of almost those repeatable Lego blocks is how I think about it, so that we can be thinking about it in a way that when there is a new Lego block, we don't have to go and rebuild everything to go and adjust, which is what we did we already had a privacy review process. We now have a subcomponent of that relates to AI, and a subcomponent that relates to agentic AI. So we're trying to make sure we're not reinventing the wheel every time, and building these things in a way that is sustainable with huge volume as well.
Yeah.
Because you can imagine the sheer number of use cases we see in a year across a company like HP. We have to do things in a way that's repeatable and sustainable, because while we can also use AI to help speed up the review process, at some point, if it's just reviewing itself and there's no human in the loop, right, that's probably not an ideal answer either.
Absolutely. Thank you both very much. We have 2 minutes left. If anybody has a really good, whatever question, I don't know what a really good question is, but whatever question, please ask. Go ahead, presenters.
Yeah, I just wanted to close out with a couple of takeaways. I mean, even if you don't think you're actively using AI, AI is being used in pretty much all of the systems that you'll be interacting with, right? From the Zoom and Teams transcription and some of the tools that they're using there, tools that are being used, as part of all of the apps that you use every day. It's already changing the way we work and live, and will continue to do so. We do see that AI raises many ethical issues, not just to individuals, but to groups and society as a whole. If you think about from a bias perspective, if you never train the model with certain facts, you're never going to get those answers out the other end. It's as if you take a child's education and you say, we're not going to teach you about any of that stuff, right? There will then be bias inherent in what that person will be able to know about. And we want to make sure that we're not effectively doing the same thing with AI as well. So looking not just at the impact on individuals, but potentially the impact on society as a whole, if everybody is gradually having their worldview changed and they don't even realize it because of the way the models are being trained, which we've already started to see. And then really just, there is a lot of AI education out there, a lot of which is free. So really trying to realize the benefits while managing the risks, particularly these newer risks, things like deepfakes and, whether this is actually a real Nesta or a virtual Nesta will become increasingly hard to tell. So how do we make sure that people, and we're thinking about that as well with things that we're doing. If you are talking to an agent, you want to know if it's a human agent or a virtual agent, right? And we want to make sure we're building those experiences so that you always know. and you're not trying to guess between, are you dealing with an AI or are you dealing with a person? So that's kind of part of the work that we're doing. Thanks for taking the time today to learn a bit more about it. And yeah, we're always happy to answer any more questions as well.
There's a question from Saul Flores. Saul, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Sure. My question is, how do you expect AI to change the user experience for your consumers? Maybe you can speak on from the HP side of things. I'm not sure like what actual well, for reference, I'm a graduate student studying biochemistry, and I do some computational stuff as well. And I mean, outside of using models that are trained, and I've will use it for like scheduling whatever, and I've messed around with a lot of different tools and whatnot, but I wanted to know, like, realistically, like, how do you think from your perspective AI will change the user experience, not just for like HP, but like for anyone that's buying something that comes packaged with AI?
Mhm.
I mean, I think the greatest benefit of AI is learning from previous experience. And so if you take all sorts of data points on something that's been a problem in the past, and AI is very quickly able to identify what's the root of that and what can be the potential fix. And as a company, you can help figure out what that fix is, and then you implement it into your product, and therefore you improve the user experience with that product. So perfect example for us, and I use the word perfect, kind of funny that I did. In our print line of business, I don't know how many of you have ever tried to print out a recipe that you find on one of these pages. And I don't know what it is, but like everyone needs to write their life story now before they get to writing the actual recipe now. And then when you print it out, it prints out on like 9 pages. And so one of our AI applications is looking to look at a website, focus on just what is the recipe, and then print out just that, right? As opposed to all that 9 pages of junk. So hopefully not junk, because that is someone's life. I don't want to like, cast any sort of aspersions or anything. But you know what I mean? Like sometimes you just want the recipe. And so that is one way that you can make the user experience better, is by just focusing them on what they really want, which is to be able to have the recipe so that they can cook it, whatever it is that they were looking for. I don't know, Aaron, if you have any other examples you'd like to share.
Well, or if you print out an Excel file, and yes, you told it to print 1 column on each
That's
of
true.
20 pages, but it should come back and say, that's not really what you wanted, right? And those are the kinds of things where, because we can see what a million print jobs look like, you can identify what's a good print job, what's a bad print job, how do you help to optimize some of those things? So that's on the print side of the business. But then if you look at things like, our video cameras that can do, we've all got virtual backgrounds, but even beyond that, we've got technology where my dog could sit here and bark next to me and you wouldn't hear him, because it identifies the sound of a dog bark as being distinct from a human voice. And those kind of things where you can use AI to do real-time audio and video processing in a way that allows people, you don't have to have kind of a room at the other end of the house, because most of us work from home these days, right? So you're getting some of those additional benefits through the use of AI that maybe you wouldn't think of. But yeah, that's what I meant about it's being built into kind of everything that's happening right now.
Awesome. Well, I'm so sorry. Hewlett Packard, HP, thank you so much for your time. We went a little bit over because we wanted to for you to answer all the questions that the participants had. I thank you, HP, for your time and dedication to the subject. Please do know that we want to continue to have this engagement with you because we need to learn more. HI is advancing at the speed of light, and we are in the dark here. So we will continue to have these conversations for you all to enlighten us. And thank you, all you participants, for being here, for engaging and giving us your time. We so appreciate it. Any last remaining questions before they leave?
I'd like to go ahead and ask one question before we go.
Okay,
So, my question would be, how can we view an AI as an asset when it comes to creativity, conventional use, instead of viewing AI as taboo? Because I brought this up because so the operating agent operator gets tasks done, right? So uh operators basically linked to apps like DoorDash, and with this in mind, it's capable of like making like decisions for you, heck, even your own order. So that's where I was going with this, and I just had to bring this up.
Yeah, I think from a creativity perspective, one way that I found AI really useful is it gets me off of the blank page problem. Like, where do I start with some of these things?
Mm.
And I think from an agent perspective as well, and Nestor and I were chatting about this the other day, we're both pretty picky when it comes to vacation spots and the hotel you want to stay in, and kind of so we're not ready to just say, here's my credit card, go and book me a vacation just yet. But some people will be. But I think that the creativity partially comes in terms of the thinking about how is AI going to help you and not just relying on it to do the right thing for you.
Right.
But also in those scenarios, you know, there's a lot of flexibility if you're someone working at a DoorDash or an Uber. But to one of the examples Nestor gave earlier, you haven't seen the experiences of 10,000 DoorDash drivers as to know maybe you'll get just as much money if you work for 2 hours on Wednesday versus 4 on Thursday. And I think be able to kind of provide those insights to you, because you may never be able to work them out yourself, that's then allowing you to do more with the same amount of resources on your end. So those are the kinds of things that I'd hope would come through. But of course, you know, is that really in the best interest of, well, maybe it's in the best interest of the company too, because I think when those things align, if you're feeling that you're getting more money out of the same amount of effort, maybe you would be more inclined to say to somebody else, hey, come and do this as well, right? So I think that's where it's trying to align the incentives. But I do think you can get some of those things where you're not kind of killing creativity with AI, you're really kind of taking the best of both.
Oh, that's fair. Thank you.
okay, well, thank you all for being here. HP, again, thank you for your time. I'm so sorry that I went over the time, but thank you for your dedication and your passion about the subject. Thank you all for being here, and this is a recording. It will be in our SHIP channel. So thank you all very, very, very much.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.